All right, welcome back. It is the Vegas Take. Sharp and Shapiro, glad you could join us. By the way, we do have some breaking news in regards to this officer that has been charged with murder in the shooting of an African-American woman through a window in Dayton. We're going to talk about that. Actually, I'm sorry, it was
Dallas-Fort Worth.
Dallas-Fort Worth, I apologize. So we'll be talking about that breaking news coming up in the next segment. Lee Goldberg from the GCI guys will be joining us in studio as well. But I want to start talking a little bit about Monday Night Football last night because, well, my producer and I, we bet the Packers money line. The Packers were favored by minus 3.5 points. So we got very lucky. If you don't know what happened, Aaron Rodgers marched the ball downfield. There were a couple controversial calls that allowed the Packers to run out the clock and just kick a chip shot field goal to win the game by 1. At that time, they were down 2. But there were a lot of controversial calls in this game that benefited the Packers, particularly a couple flags by the same player, hands to the face, illegal hands to the face, when there were no hands to the face, JD, right? I mean, it was basically hands to the shoulder. I mean, I didn't really understand.
No, one of them, there was hands to the face, and one there was hands to nowhere near the face.
Can't you make that call almost every play? I mean, that happens every play.
Here's the problem. Trey, and this is really bad for the NFL, but Trey Flowers is a 6'2", 265-pound D-end. He's not a big guy. The average tackle is 6'7". He's got long arms. He was a New England Patriot last year. He had a huge year, and his year put him in the position to be the biggest free agent signing of the offseason, and the Lions decided to pick him up. He's used this move probably 150 times. It's one of the reasons why he was successful. But now that he's a Lion, he's called for it twice. That's the issue. There's a giant bias there. Because, he's an undersized guy. That's his move. Dwight Freeney did the same thing.
But let me ask you a question. Do you think that this is a situation where the fix was in and they wanted to make – because if that was the case, why would the game be so close?
I don't know about the fix being in. The fix being – it's more of an entertainment value thing. It does help the NFL. And one thing you have to look at, and this is not – and you can call this a conspiracy perspective, but like a Pat Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers, when I mention these two quarterbacks, what do you think?
Well, say what do you mean? What do I think?
These are all-star. These are premium quarterbacks.
These are great players.
But you don't just see these guys in games. You see these guys in commercials. You see these guys in endorsements.
Well, of course, they're marketed.
Exactly, yeah. They're marketed huge, and so you want to see more of them. So they give you a dose of Mahomes 5 or 6 times a week before you see him on Sunday. Okay. You want him to do well.
Who gets more ratings, Aaron Rodgers or Matt Stafford?
It's not even close. Yeah. It's Aaron Rodgers.
Of course,
it comes down to money. Like everything else, it's a very simple common denominator here. In the playoffs,
what's better for the NFL?
In the playoffs, are you going to watch a Lions game or a Packers game?
Well,
you're going to watch a Packers game because the Lions have been to one playoff game in 50 years. They don't have a huge fan base. They have a bunch of guys like Chris Wynn and Brian Feldman who just keep getting kicked in the nuts every single year, and they're expected to be happy about it. There's a massive Packers following. There's a massive Packers fan base across the United States and internationally, and the NFL makes money on them because they watch the games, they buy the jerseys. So you have to think about that when something like this takes place, because the Lions should have won that game. There was also a play.
I want our producer in here because he watched the game as I was.
And let's be honest,
Stein, get in the studio.
I had the Lions. I didn't lose money last night. I made my biggest bet of the year on the Lions +4. I bought half a point. But they should have won the game by 10 or 14 points.
Yeah.
There was even a play where the Lions were called for 12 men on the field. And then about half a quarter later, the Packers actually had 13 men on the field. Yeah. And they didn't even call a flag.
So our producer, Jason Stein, as we have to call him Steiner or Steiny instead of Baba Booey.
We haven't settled on a name.
I call him All-Star.
So he made his second
Smells
bet.
In here.
He made his does it really?
That's Brian.
No, it's not. Do I smell?
It's absolutely Brian.
Do I really smell?
Terrible.
I've used the restroom several times this morning.
Sorry.
You think that has something to do with it? I don't know.
Let's focus here.
Sorry about that. Anyway, so you made your second bet in the history of coming to Las Vegas. You just moved here several weeks ago to produce this show. So your heart was pounding. There was a point in the game yesterday where the Packers could have been down 17-0. And I said, oh, my God, the fix is in. I think they want Detroit to win. And then as the game progressed, the Packers got every single call imaginable. I mean, there was a play, I think it was like 3rd and 8, and they called illegal hands to the face, and it kept a drive going. That led to a touchdown. And then late in the game, they don't even give Detroit a chance to hold the football because of 2 flags with illegal hands to the face that allowed them to march down the field. What did you make? You were on the right side of everything.
Yeah, a second bet through the William Hill app which I've discovered. Yeah, I mean, what can I say? I mean, I thought, from a football fan standpoint, it was horrible, and I totally understand why Detroit Lions fans would be upset. But for me, I mean, it was great, right, Brian? It was great. But we talked about this early in the game. The Packers had some penalties go against them that seemed a little unfair too.
They did.
So maybe it balanced out in the end. I don't know.
Well, what JD is trying to say is not necessarily that the fix was in, but what is better for the NFL? Is it better for the NFL to have Aaron Rodgers go into the playoffs and go deep into the playoffs, or the Detroit Lions? And I think that the answer is pretty simple here. It's the Green Bay Packers. I mean,
one storyline I was worried about was Matthew Stafford's wife and her battle with brain cancer, because they kept showing her in the stands every time Matthew Stafford did something good. They showed her.
Listen, it's a nice.
They even were talking about it during the final seconds when Mason Crosby hit that field goal. They were talking about Stafford's wife.
That very difficult 23-yard field goal.
Yeah, so I was a little. I thought maybe the NFL wanted that storyline as Matthew Stafford walks off the field with his wife.
Let me just say this: that Monday Night Football crew of Booger and Joe Tessitore, one of the worst crews I've ever seen do a football game.
You have to respect Booger for saying, "Hey, this was not a penalty." Why these guys? He literally said these guys just got screwed, and they did, and I have to respect that because they got totally screwed in that game.
Yeah, as annoying as Booger is.
Tessitore's worse.
Yeah, I agree.
Flag? No flags. I mean, that's the way the guy broadcast.
And there's a flag.
No flags.
There's nowhere to be found.
I'll tell you what's not good for the NFL is when your own players currently playing, like Clay Matthews, are tweeting about how messed up the reffing is, how it's the worst refereeing they've seen in 15 years. That's not good for the NFL. I'm not talking like Barry Sanders made a post. He's got that Lions bias, but Clay Matthews is making $15 million a year to rush the quarterback for the Rams right now, and he made a statement.
We hear this every year.
That's not like this. This is as bad as it's ever been.
Would you agree? I don't know if I agree with that. I think it's bad every year.
What about when we had the replacement refs 5 years ago?
That was
whenever
really
that
bad.
was.
That was really bad.
Remember?
Those are replacement refs.
Wow. That was really bad. That was when the regular referees were on strike.
This is the worst with regular referees.
This is Clete Blakeman. He does the Super Bowl every single year.
Look, this is not a good look for the NFL.
They're losing ratings. I mean, if honestly, and I said this before, if I didn't bet the NFL, I literally wouldn't watch it.
They're not going to lose ratings, and the reason why is because gambling is going to be legalized everywhere, and that's the reason why
I understand
people watch the NFL,
and that's why sports exist.
The ratings.
And that's why I do what I do.
I think the ratings are going to be just fine.
I completely disagree with that.
I think they're going to be just fine.
Not everybody bets sports.
As long as there's gambling,
the casual sports fan who doesn't bet sports is not going to watch the NFL. I don't believe.
I tend to disagree with you on that. I think as long as there's legal gambling going on, there's always going to be a large audience watching football games, especially the big football games. So, yeah, I don't think that's going to be an issue at all. All right, so we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, Lee Goldberg from the GCI guys is going to be joining us. Speaking of homes and selling homes, well, this has been a big story that has been in the news the last several days, and it's a very tragic story of an African-American woman that is sitting in her home. Police are called to the scene, and an officer shoots her through a window. But now we are learning breaking news that could change the shape of this entire tragic situation. And it's coming from an 8-year-old boy, the nephew of the African-American woman who lost her life. This is a crazy story, and now it's getting more interesting. We'll explain what that means coming up next. You're listening to the Vegas Take, 101.5 FM, 720 AM, KDAWN.